What is up, everybody? We are back, and somebody's back. Yahola Tiger's back.
Me, I'm back. Hi.
That's actually his spirit. He's not really physically here.
No, there's a projector right up over here in the corner behind Tyler. It's going right over his ear too.
Hologram,
like the Tupac hologram.
I'm over here just telling him weird, random stories of Bigfoot's Wild Weekend.
Our new movie. No.
Yeah.
But with a twist.
Part 2. The Deuce.
Not even just a deuce, a double deuce.
Well, thanks for coming through, Yahola.
Yes, sir.
Yep. We roasted you on the last one.
Man, I'm ready for that one.
I'm just kidding.
I'm ready for that one. I've been writing my bars all week.
So I guess everybody can add him back as a friend.
Yeah.
I know. Some people was unfriending me. No, I'm just playing.
Getting blocked left and right.
I know.
Yep.
They said, "Oh, he's not a part of the crew anymore."
It was a Yahola Tiger block party. Blocked.
Hey, don't worry. I repeated the favor, so I blocked you too.
Oh, really? Because I didn't notice. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm still liking your post. No,
Dang, he's real creep. Acting like that, boy. No.
you blocked me. I blocked you right back.
We're at war.
Dang.
Yeah, I know.
He's souring that cornbread down there.
Yeah.
Too fermented.
Yeah. Dang.
Well, it's good to be back, boys. It really is. How did the last episode go?
It was good.
That was real good.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I mean, I guess at the time that you're seeing this,
Yeah.
I will have already known.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how it went.
Yeah. You saw that.
Hologram.
You listened.
Yahola. We're still working out the kinks with the hologram stuff. So
Yeah. And we're going to create our own conspiracy of me being here, me not being
he's
here.
a clone.
Yeah.
Just don't know.
I need to build like a Yahola doll. You know, like put the iPad.
Nah, then you go
his
start
face.
poking it with needles and stuff.
Dang.
I'll be like, dang, my stomach's hurting.
Let's get a giant Mountain Red Bull, Mountain Dew,
Mountain Red Bull.
Oh.
a Mountain Dew bottle, and then put the iPad on it.
Yeah, that's it.
Put the
Dang it.
So listener stories, anybody?
I got a lot.
Before you guys get started, I'd like to throw a shout out. I don't know if any of you guys can see this Keen medallion that I'm wearing. And it was created by Leloni Marie Mowich. She's from Idaho. And she owns the Two Bears Healing and Craft Store on Facebook. I want to encourage you guys to hit her up for some business. You know, Idaho's known for their Bigfoot stories. This lady, she creates her own ointments, facial things. They're all traditional herbal remedies from her nation. And so if you guys can help her out, you know, she's a struggling business. You know, again, you know, she made this medallion. And she does other bead work, and I think her man does too. And so if you guys can help her out, you know, they're part of the Bigfoot Nation up that way. So again, you guys help them out. Aho.
Yeah. I know some of y'all are getting your tax returns back now. Don't be go
Oh my god!
spending them on things you're not supposed to be spending it on now.
Buy local. Buy from your local artist.
Yeah.
Your
Chris has already got his back.
designers.
There will be signs.
I done spent my tax return. No, I'm just kidding. No.
That medallion and sack of Brahms. One and done.
What's that deal? They got the 5 for. It's a 5 for 10
It's like the burger bag or
The
something.
burger bag, that's what it is, yeah.
Junior burgers.
Dang, people was
Yeah.
up in arms too. I think it went up like 25 cents. They was mad.
Yeah, we was talking not too long ago about the 5 for $5 at Arby's, man. Back in the day, you could get 5 for $5. Woo.
Let's not even talk about gas.
Oh, that was the days, man.
Gas prices? Nah,
I
we
thought you
didn't.
talking about gas after Arby's.
That's why I had to clarify. Tyler gonna go left on that one. Letting it rip.
I seen it's 5 for $10 now.
Yeah.
5 for 10 at Arby's?
Yeah.
Man.
Went up $5.
I always wondered. I know it's probably prime rib, but like my question is, how come I can't buy that actual type of meat at Walmart or somewhere? Like, why don't you just get like packaged Arby's meat somewhere?
They might.
They might.
I know they do.
They got the curly fries.
I was trying to buy sausage now at Walmart, and they have Whataburger sausage here.
Oh,
That's
seriously?
wild. Dang.
Yeah,
dang.
and it says like, what does it say? Like, our very own special sausage is now available to you, or something, and it's like Whataburger sausage.
Dang.
And it just tastes like how it does
Regular
at our-
sausage?
no, like how our Whataburger sausage tastes when you order it.
I've never had Whataburger sausage, so
It's all right.
can't speak on
It's
it.
okay. It's like 11 a.m. to 11 or 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. when they serve breakfast, so it's all right. I wouldn't. It's not blue and gold,
Oh yeah, let's not even get started on blue and gold now.
man.
So get y'all's Whataburger sausage now.
I know there's a-
That's tax return money. Blue and gold, right there. Sausage, bacon.
chicken.
I heard
you
their chicken's
name it.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's just regular chicken.
Yeah,
Like it ain't no wild stuff in it.
like organic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, technically, I guess organic is wild, but anyways,
free range.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Tyler,
I'm
just kidding.
sure.
I got this story about Bigfoot. This person wants to be left anonymous. She said it was early morning around 6:30, very light fog because it's almost always foggy here in South Alabama. It was going past the open pole barn on the next little hill. It was black and tall as the poles and fast. It literally blinked and it was gone. A month or so later, we were driving the back way home. A little bit down from a big pine forest. My teenage son saw one step under a light pole, then back into darkness, and when we drove by, it was the same thing, almost as tall as a light pole and black, dark brown. We also heard it. It makes coyotes shut up, and we just go in the house. You can tell when it's out, the animals act different. And she said, my great Pyrenees mix, big white dog will not go to the bathroom. She wants to go back in. We were out one night, and she perked her ears up and was staring out in the dark, and we heard it out near the cow pasture. It sounded like, ooh-wah, ooh-wah. We were done for the night. And she just said, thanks for, being respectful to these beings and using like the correct terms, and just keep doing what we're doing. So shout out to you. Thank you for that story. It's kind of been in here for a while now, but we're going through them.
Yeah, but that was a good one.
Yeah, that's one thing about when we get stories. Sometimes when they're like in text, and then you you send us multiple stories, we get lost. And so I got a story from Jonathan Blackbear. Man, this is from October 2022. Like, just a lot of stories going on. But so I have briefly mentioned this story before. I think at a live event, and also too maybe even on another podcast. But he tells kind of the other perspective of that story. So, so this story is Louis Jackson's story. He was the athletics director over at Sequoia for a lot of years, and he was a really good friend of mine, my grandpa. And this story comes out of Kenwood. This is how this story was told. So there was somebody who lived out on the edge of this field. On the other edge of the field was a big hill. The kids were playing outside. It was getting real close to dusk. the kids could hear something moving on the hill, and they go inside and get their grandma. She comes out looking across the field, and they see movement at the edge of the woods. She grabs them and tells them to get inside and cover the windows. She tells them to get down on the floor and to cover their eyes. He basically said that what they were seeing was best be described as the flying monkeys off the Wizard of Oz. He said that they were actual demons, is what he would say. And, you could hear basically flapping of the wings coming over the house.
Whoa.
And so that story, like I said, I've told that story before, but one thing too that he gave me a little bit more background on it. And one thing about in that Kenwood area, they've been reported as seeing monkeys kind of in the trees and, flapping about and things like that. One time he tells his own personal story. He's driving down the road and he kind of looks off to the side and there's a little monkey. Yeah, there's like a monkey standing next to the road and he sees it go up the tree. And then they went back and, got back and they went back out to look and it wasn't even there. There's nothing there. And so, that's out of the Kenwood area, kind of Cherokee Nation res. Sorry, Jonathan, man. I've had that one in the tuck for a while, but I appreciate you sharing that. What do you guys think of that?
I've heard a lot of stories of monkeys, either in Oklahoma, and it's always kind of the same story. Like a circus train was traveling, cross country, and there was a wreck. The only reason I mentioned that is because Russell had told a story, was it up in Pawnee, about that. And then when I did my research for the folk monster up in Arkansas, Folk, Arkansas, they said that was another theory about where the folk monster had come from, that it was a wrecked circus train and there was these apes that had escaped and had just, gone on, which they said is, it's plausible because the environment and the habitat would be okay, that they could survive in that kind of, environment. Mm-hmm. But as far as going back and looking at historical records, like newspaper articles and things like that, that there was nothing, ever found or published that there was maybe a train wreck, but no escaped animals, where it'd be a lion but monkeys always seem to be the the culprits whenever there is a train wreck of some kind. But I just kind of thought that was interesting. But yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy you mentioned monkeys because I just heard a few stories about monkeys in Pawnee, and it was my aunt Angie Echohawk and Aunt Alice Carroll. We were at the art market in Kiefer, and they called me over there, and they were talking about this time where I don't want to mention any names, but this man was driving on this highway, and then they looked in the trees, and they said they seen this orange hand go from one tree to the next, and it would look like a orangutan arm, and they swore it was an orangutan. And then somebody else seen the same exact thing, but it was running, almost how orangutans run. They kind of look like a ball, almost. That's what he said it looked like. It was this orange hairy ball that almost was rolling across the road. And it reminded me of Critters. You ever seen the movie Critters? Those balls. That's what came to my mind. But he said man, it had to be an orangutan. The same thing that this person saw. And so. And then we started talking about just different, because I heard that, you said, that was a story of an old circus train was going through town and it wrecked. And then so that's where these monkeys came from. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of just roamed around the area. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I heard when I was a kid. But I don't know if that's real or not. If anybody else from Pawnee, because they've heard that too. But anybody else has heard that, man, let me know, because that's very interesting. And there was one story we talked about. I heard about this story last year, but it was this guy from high school, and he was going out in the country, and I guess he was leaving this house to go back to his house, and you know how it is over there, man. It's nothing out there. And so he said he was driving, and he was almost on E, so he was trying to make it back home. And all of a sudden, he said he was just driving on a dirt road, and this thing walked out from the woods, and it was a monkey. It was a monkey, like a chimp almost, and it had this long tail, and it was just walking upright, but it had red eyes and sharp teeth, and it looked right at him. I don't know if it jumped on his car or not, but it looked right at him, and he just like U-turned it, went back to the house,
Man.
and he told him what happened, and then he was freaked out though. Like that scared him to like death. And I mean, I would want to talk to him about that, but I don't know like the contact information or anything. But I would like to like know more about that story if he's up, because that's scary. Like,
that is,
that's very traumatizing to see that. You know, you don't really know like what is truly out there, and so we were talking about that and just getting spooked and everything. And I just found that interesting. Like monkeys has just been brought up.
Yeah. That's crazy how fate works. No. But, you know, so like I said, you know, that's been something going on for a long time in a lot of different areas. And, you know, I got another story from Jonathan. And this one's it's a lot different than the previous story. And so he was on a mission trip to Malaysia, and he was talking to the pastor at a local church. Before he became a believer in Jesus, he was the second highest priest in the Hindu temple. And he was called out one night when he was still a Hindu priest, and a girl was possessed. A young girl was possessed. He says that she was doing things that might seem unreal. Dang.
What could you do?
I was like, dang, start moving stuff around now. But basically they were saying that she was doing things that night that just like were crazy, just unreal. And he said that at one point she stuck her tongue out, and it was like almost as long as like up down to almost her weight, like it from her mouth, and like it was like that long. And he said basically they thought they drove the demon out, but after he had become a believer, he had kind of realized that the thing, whatever that thing was inside of her, tricked him and faked like it was gone. He ended up coming back, and he said that basically. That priest goes on to say basically that he thought that, you know, they didn't do things right, and so it came back. I thought it was a pretty crazy story, you know, when it comes to that type of stuff. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that anything's better than this, but, you know, for him to see that pastor to see that and basically be converted from that to this, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Tyler?
No, I think I was at that show. I think they played God of Thunder right before that happened. No, I'm just kidding. Talk about Kiss. She spit blood and God of Thunder. Oh, sorry.
Dang, but that's crazy though. That
is crazy.
That tongue going all the way down that far, like, man,
almost like a snake.
Yeah. Chris, you got a story?
Yeah, I got one from. Russell might have to correct me on the pronunciation. Adrienne Eckelhawk. She writes, I forgot to tell you something else. When I'm with Peter, I see orbs from time to time. I always like to stop to look at it, and Peter never sees them. So, about 2 weeks ago, I was sitting on his lap facing him. We was talking and laughing, and I seen an orb between us. So I watched it, and it flies towards my left shoulder. So I can tell and see that he saw it, too. So I try to touch and grab it, and I say, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yeah, it flew behind you." So I say, "See, I told you. I see them floating around all quick, 'cause there's 0 bugs up here, especially when it's negative degrees." She lives in Alaska, and she's always talking about these orbs in their place. And she was telling one story that one evening they seen these look like little bitty handprints all over their patio window, it fogs up, and it's like they're facing out, and so anyway, she says, they're always seeing stuff like that up there, and she was telling me that other story, and I thought, wow, that's pretty crazy. So I said, dang, I appreciate that, Miss Eckelhawk.
Those orbs get that close. Huh?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
So anyway, that's one of the stories I have. You guys got one?
Man, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's
like
one thing
that.
about orbs. Like when people always take pictures or videos, and you kind of see something, kind of going. But like, I'm just curious. Like, she actually sees them. Like, is it like different colors, or is it just? Did she say anything about that? Maybe.
She says they're always light blue.
Oh wow.
So
Oh wow.
I know there's a theory behind the different colors of those orbs, but knowing that information, I can't recall right now. But I do have another story, and this one was kind of anonymous. Anyway, it's kind of a off the wall type story, so I'm just saying that up front. So before anybody comes crashing down, again, this individual, she didn't want to be known, but I'm gonna tell her name anyway. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just teasing. But anyway, story goes that this is a Oto girl up from around Red Rock way, and anyway, her and her girls, I forget what they call it. Their homies up there. What do they call them? Anyway,
Homies?
God. Oh man, I can't even think of it. Anyway,
In Oto?
Yeah, in Oto.
I don't know.
I forget what they call it there.
Like the native name or?
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know.
I know if I say it, you'd say, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure." I can't. Well, anyway, she said her and her homegirls, they went to Hominy to go party around with these Osage guys. Anyway, they had planned this for like a couple of weeks or so, and anyway, story goes they went up to go party with those guys because those guys invited them. And my understanding, this story happened, way back, before cell phones and everything. So somehow they got a message saying that party's going on, and so they went up there that weekend, and these girls, they run across this carload of guys. They were broke down on the side of the road on Highway 20, right on the outskirts of Hominy, and she said they pulled up behind them because she recognized who they were, So anyway, they got out and talked to them, and they said their car broke down, and they said, "Well, we can give you a ride, back to your place, and we come down here to hang out anyway." So anyway, they picked them up and took them back to where this guy was staying and everything. And anyway, make a long story short, they partied, had a good time. Great night, and anyway, sun was starting to come up, so they said their goodbyes and went back to Red Rock, and I guess next couple of days they had heard a word that there was a wreck a couple weeks ahead before they went down there, and supposedly that wreck had all those guys in there. And so it kind of flipped her out. She called up all her homegirls, and she said, "Did you hear so-and-so passed away? And, this guy passed away, this guy passed away." And they said, "Oh, that can't be." So they said, "Well, let's load up after work, and we'll go down there and, go to their house, see, So they went down there, and they got down there to that house, and it's been empty for a long time because everything was already moved out of there and, stuff like that. So they asked around, and come to find out, those group of guys, they all got killed in a car wreck,
Whoa.
about 4 weeks, past, and they said, "Dang," she said, "that was crazy," because they said, that not only did they, pick them up, but took them back and they partied with them and
What? Oh my goodness!
and then came back, found all that, and I thought, man, that's a crazy story.
crazy.
What?
But anyway,
Man.
again, I know a lot of Indian communities, they have similar stories to that, and again, I appreciate this individual. I know she's a avid listener, so I appreciate that. Aho and Mado.
Appreciate that, man. Wow.
That's awesome.
Man, if anybody has any more stories like that, send them to us.
Dang, Chris, that gave me goosebumps, man.
Yeah.
Golly, man.
That's scary.
Dang. And they partied with him all night long?
So
What they say they took him to that house?
took him to that house.
The one that was empty?
Yeah, the one that was empty, because that's where that guy
Oh,
lived.
my God.
That's
oh,
crazy.
my goodness.
Well,
Man.
I couldn't imagine. I'd be freaking out.
dang, that was a pretty good one, though.
That is
Dang,
good.
that was, yeah. I'm kind of shook by that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We're done. No, I'm just kidding.
See y'all next
Chris
time.
ended it.
Man, wow.
Damn, that was a good one. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like stories like that, like where later on you find out, like, oh, they're gone.
Yeah,
they're
they're
no
not-
longer with us, and it's
Man.
like, whoa,
They're out there, too. I know there's some out there. God.
man. I have this one's a hide and seek story, and so this guy remained anonymous, but from 2004, me and about 9 other little cousins wanted to play hide and seek. This was around St. Patrick's Day. We started around 9ish, just having fun, being loud. Then during each round we played, our dog started barking at this one spot. As kids we ignored him. So when I was the person to go seek him out, I looked where the dogs are barking, but seen no one there. A few more rounds of playing, me and my cousins were hiding behind the house by a propane tank. And behind us is an open field. We heard something on 2 legs run up on us. We turned and looked, seen no one. So we both said at the same time, this is the last game. Once we all got to the base, we told the other cousins to go home. It's getting late. And about 20 minutes later, my older brother took the trash out, came running to the house calling me and our oldest brother to come out, saying there's something out by the dump. It growled, so we went out to go see. Then we heard it run off into the woods, into the open field on 2 feet, giggling as it was running. The only thing we could have thought of, since it was St. Patrick's Day, maybe it was a leprechaun. But we don't know to this day. So,
Man.
yeah.
Especially running up on behind you like that.
Giggling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
The dogs are barking at it, and they didn't pay attention to it.
Time to go inside, man.
Jeez. Yeah, especially at night, playing hide and go seek.
That's scary. You're never supposed to be playing hide and go seek at night.
Y'all know dang well y'all supposed to be in when the street light come on.
Y'all know what happens to me when I play hide and go seek at night. All right.
Yeah.
They don't call me Deuce for nothing.
Yeah. I got another couple of stories from Kevin Tossaqua for Norman. And I was going to let Tyler read these for me.
Yeah, it says, let me introduce myself. My name is Kevin Tossaqua. I'm Comanche from Southwest Oklahoma. Back in the early 90s, my uncle bought a house in a place they call Richard Spur. One evening, he was working on the inside, remodeling, and he heard a knock at the door. When he went to answer it, there was an old Indian man there asking if he could have a drink of water. My uncle let him in, and the old man sat on some carpet while my uncle went to get him water. When he brought his water, he asked my uncle who his people were, and my uncle said Pakati Kelso was his grandpa. And the old man said, yeah, I know him. And then he asked for a cigarette, and he gave him one. And the old man told him about some neighbors around who was good and who was bad. The old man told my uncle his name and thanked him for the water and the smoke and said he would see him again and left. A few days later, my uncle told my grandma that he had his first visitor, and he told my grandma his name, and my grandma said that she knew him, but that he had died a few years earlier.
Wow.
Man.
So he says here he thinks he was coming to check out who was moving in there to see if that was a good person or not.
Whoa.
Dang.
So that's a cool
That's
story.
He has another.
there's another
That's
one.
another
He has
heater.
Yeah, he has another.
Look through that
story.
phone, Tyler. No, just kidding.
Dang, Chris, you wear that? No,
What is
Every
that?
day. No, I'm just kidding.
you don't leave much of the imagination on this.
Ah.
Says, I watched your episode about the Ghost Highway, and I have a story that happened to me. I don't know if you heard about the Indian City Hill, but one night about 11, I was on my way to work, and a car got right behind me with its bright lights on, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and someone was sitting in the back seat. I just told it that I was on my way to work and that I was more than welcome to ride, that it was more than welcome to ride. Then when I got close to Anadarko, the car backed off and the person was gone. So that one's a creepy one too.
Yeah.
I always have that big fear, man, of getting in your car. I don't know if it's just because of that Twilight Zone episode, but you know what I mean? Like getting in your car and somebody being back there. I've heard a story about that too, picking up like a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker giving somebody like some information that would later on like save them. And then when they like looked back or whatever, like the person was gone. Like I don't remember that story though. I'll have to see if I can do some research on that. But it happened to a person that I know. So they picked up a hitchhiker and was just kind of casually talking to him, and I think the same thing, bummed a smoke, and guy was just sitting in the back seat smoking, and then told them some kind of information that ended up saving their life. But they looked back and he was just disappeared, like just gone, you know. And then whenever they got to where they were going to go, something had happened, man. I can't remember that whole story, but yeah, I'll have to see if I can do some research on that one.
Sure appreciate that, Mr. Tossaquah.
Yeah, that was two good stories. Those were awesome. Thank you for sending those.
Find out those stories.
Yeah, for sure.
Dang.
I remember somebody telling me. It's in my family, too, but I'll have to remember who that was. I'd talk to my parents, maybe.
Man, I come back on the podcast and y'all bring this heat.
Yeah.
Dang.
All for you.
Dang, I appreciate that. Man, those are some great stories. And that's one thing that, like, you know, when we talk about things, I love it that we get, like, an after effect from people. People just say, hey, man, I got this story of this, and this. It's like, man, and a lot of these stories are awesome. I mean, there are a lot of them. I mean, just about every one of them are awesome. And we appreciate y'all sending those in because we're going to tell them.
Yeah. I got about 2 more. How many you got, Chris?
I think. Well, I can't. I'm having trouble finding mine. So.
Ooh. If you find them, let me know.
Okay.
All right. So this one is from Ty Stewart. He wants credit for it. So he says, I used to work in the cash vault at the Cherokee Casino in West Salem. I had 2 older Indian ladies that were my supervisors, and when we were in the vault, our receipt machine that would tell us how much money we had ran through the machine would just start printing receipts with no one around it. No big deal. We would just laugh and keep working. Well, I got a new position and wasn't back there for a few months. One night, they needed help, so I went back to help the new girl. The machine started again, and the new girl was freaking out. And I asked her if that's the first time it's ever done that. And she said yes. Me and the 2 supervisors just laughed and said, if you're in here with us, print another receipt off. And it printed a 5-foot-long receipt.
What? That's crazy.
Dang.
I wonder what it was, though.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I thought it might have some kind of like message or something on it.
Man, that would have been crazy.
Yeah.
Look behind you now.
Yeah.
It's like, dang.
Like in, what's it called? Like the numbers, when you receive messages and numbers sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's that, Morse? Is that Morse code?
Morse code is.
Is that
D? Yeah.
Well, what's the numbers?
Yeah.
I know there's a number one
It's,
where.
what is it? It's like a, never mind, man. I don't even know.
I know there's something
It was
like
that movie with Jim Carrey, like the number 23 or something like that.
That's when he goes psycho.
Yeah. He went.
Throw that receipt machine out then.
Yeah.
Do more than that, man.
Time to reboot that thing. Exercise that demon.
And then I'll do one more. Okay, so this one is from Solomon Wilson. An old Muskogee man was friends with an old white man who was a cattle rancher. The cattle rancher owned land not far from a ceremonial ground. A creek ran through the cattle rancher's land. Before the cattle rancher owned that land, Muskogee and white people from around that area used to get water and swim in that creek until people started vanishing in the water. So people looked for their bodies, and some were found with tips of their noses gone and earlobes gone as well. The Muskogee people around that area knew why those parts of the bodies were missing. So they stopped going or traveling by that creek. As years came and gone, that land with the creek came up for sale, and the white cattle rancher bought it. He became friends with the Muskogee man that lived down the road from his piece of land he bought. One day, he was driving by the creek on his land to check on his cattle and saw something he didn't recognize swimming in that creek. He thought it was a buck, so he shot it and roped around the horns and pulled it out of the creek with his truck. He got out of his truck to untie the rope and come to find out it wasn't a buck at all, but a creature with horns on its face of an old man with long gray hair and body of a snake. He didn't know what to make of it, so he called his Muskogee friend down the road. The cattle rancher told him he shot something thinking it was a buck swimming in his creek. The Muskogee man asked, "What does it look like?" So he told him he had horns on his face of an old man with long gray hair and a body of a snake. The cattle rancher said, "Come and look at it," but the Muskogee man said he knew what it is and the story of the creek. So he told him, "No, I can't," and made up an excuse not to go see it because he knew what would happen. He told the cattle rancher to get rid of it. A few days later, the cattle rancher died. The Muskogee man knew what that creature was in our language. If it was looked upon, a person would get sick and die if they did not get healed by medicine man. You only have a few days from the time you saw it. I thought I would share that story with y'all. Keep up the good storytelling and segments. I enjoy them. That is all.
Motto.
Appreciate that.
That's a good one. I like that one. This one's from Anonymous. It says, last episode I watched Winter Spirits, and then you guys mentioned Bigfoot. You know, about 20 years, if you remember, there was a huge ice storm. We got 2 to 3 inches of ice. Well, my dad got us a trailer home to live in on my grandparents' land east of Walitka. It's out in the middle of nowhere. So during that ice storm, we had a power water line. So during the ice storm, we had power and water lines were frozen, but had an old outhouse about 50 yards away, and we had a cable wire leading to the outhouse so that we wouldn't slip. My dad asked us if we had to go to the bathroom. I had to, so we walked down to the outhouse, and this was the night about 2 a.m. I let him go first to warm the seat up. And just about as he was finished, we heard branches breaking off to the north, several hundred feet up. At first, my dad thought it was the weight of the ice on the trees that were making the branches break. Then 3 tree branches started to break faster, like something was running, and I started to get scared, and my dad was like, "Hurry up." After hearing that, I didn't even have to go. But a few seconds later, we heard it scream. Well, more like a howl, and I ran to the house and left Dad behind. He was laughing, saying, "Slow down, wait for me." And I asked Dad what that was, and he said it in Creek, "Big man." And then he gives the name of it in Creek, which I won't say that, but yeah, that's awesome.
Motto.
Man.
I remember that ice storm.
Yeah, that was brutal.
That was awful.
And so I got one that was told to me probably, like I said, a while ago. This comes from a cousin of mine, non-native, by the way, too. And so this is kind of interesting, kind of dynamic. But he was hunting one time, and I'm not gonna tell where it was at, but he was out hunting, and he started hearing things. Like he started things started piquing his interest, kind of distracting him, and he started kind of following it because he was thinking maybe get on a specific game trail, and you get to where you need to go and to hunt. And he follows this, and he said it was like not like a whistle, but it was almost like it was like enticing him almost. And so he follows it, and he goes to look at his phone. He's been gone for a while. It felt like minutes, kind of didn't really feel that long of a time. And he ends up walking all the way down, and and he's like 15 miles away from his truck. And he has a native friend of his, and he asked him, he said, "Hey, I had something weird happen to me, and I don't know really quite what was going on, but I ended up 15 miles away from my car, and it felt like I did it in like seconds or minutes." And he goes, "What was your mindset?" And he just kind of was telling him, kind of was just following this thing, and I was just following this noise. And the guy that he was talking to, native guy, was like, "Well, LP, they affect non-natives too. If you get on their trail." And so, I was talking to my dad about that, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "Sometimes when you're in areas and places that you usually go, and there's certain times, those things can affect you, especially as a non-native. Someone who's doesn't really, he believes in Bigfoot and all this stuff, but when it comes to that stuff, he was like, man, I didn't know that the LP could affect non-natives too. So yeah, if you go on their trail and you follow them all the way down, they'll get you lost and get you kind of away from where they were at. But I thought that was pretty interesting about that, that they was kind of guiding him off, and he was like 15 miles away. He looked up, he was like, man, what time is it? And it was like way longer than it was. Mm-hmm. And he looked, and he said, dang, where's my... He started looking at the map, and he's like, oh man, I'm like far. So he had to trek, figure his way all the way back and got back to his truck, thankfully. But I was like, man, I guess they do kind of affect people, all people really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dang. Yeah, they can. Tyler.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, we did. Well, we did talk about that though, on that LP episode, how they can kind of twist up space and time and distance and so anyway, but
he
very possible.
Yeah, he was telling my dad that, and I was like, man, because he like he said, and people that don't know these things, that don't go out there, when they get hit with something like that, it's almost shocking. We know it though.
Yeah,
we know it happens.
Yeah. I like the idea though when you said it wasn't really like a being; it was just a noise that he seemed to be following. Well, it wasn't like anything that was revealed to him other than just kind of following the sound. And before you know it, you're 15 miles away from your car.
He said it was so enticing too. It was like it's like his mind was like, what is that? He kept trying to get more curious about it.
Yeah.
He'd speed up and so that's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Did you find any more, Chris?
No, my it's all messed up.
I'll look through it. No, I'm just kidding.
Be careful.
So you might not be right after that.
You want to talk about twisting your mind up?
You're sitting there, trying to come home, your face all twisted up, boy.
Missing your nose, tip of your nose, miss your earlobe.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah. They pull you in, twist you up, spit you out. You'll never be right again.
Well, I guess we're going to talk about giants on this episode. Not the New York Giants. No, just giants in general.
Or the San Francisco Giants.
San Francisco Giants. But, so we thought this would be a cool topic to talk about. I know there's been a lot of talk about giants now, like present day. People are seeing them on mountaintops or in caves, and so I know there's a lot of tribes that probably fought some giants as well. I know of one from my buddy James McLeod. Shout out Rye Potatoes, but yeah, I just thought we thought we'd talk about some giants.
Go ahead, Chris. Lead us off here.
I sure appreciate you guys picking this topic. To me, it's something that hasn't been, really expressed a lot, especially in the Indian country. But, just like Russell was saying, there's a lot of tribes out there that have stories about giants. And I know we were talking a little bit about this earlier, and I know Tyler had, some questions, and I was trying my best to kind of answer those things, and so I'm going to try my best to address some of this stuff, and I hope, I sometimes I leave things out. So again, I apologize in advance, if I leave something out or I don't tell it just right, because I know a lot of tribes out there have these old ancient stories. One of the stories that, I was wanting to kind of talk a little bit about, to kind of put a reference on this is, every tribe had a group of individuals that they considered giants, tall people, big people. There were Osages were one of them that, they considered real huge. They were big people at one time. They were huge, tall. And, you also had Pawnees, as well, one of the most famous ones that, even today in Pawnee, they have a picture of him in the building that he's named after, and his name is Rome Chief. They said, there were stories of him. He was 7.5 feet tall, almost 8 feet tall guy, and he's got descendants that are still around today. They're tall guys too. So, again, you're looking at, real things, real people. There were chiefs that were named from the many nations because of their size, how tall they were, how big they were. But some of the stories that I'm going to tell tonight, it comes from the 5 tribes. And so, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about right now, is more Muskogee oriented. Again, around those Appalachian Mountains and around Georgia and even in the Everglades, there were people there that was known to be 8 feet tall. They were tribal town members and they were huge. And without offending anybody, because I know there's still descendants of these individuals, still around. They're still around. And again, just like those Pawnees, you'll see these people. They're tall people. Their descendants are still tall. But to me, that is more specific that these things did exist. Again, way back then, they had stories of these people which were good and some weren't so good. They would raid other villages or pick on people, and some of these tribes had to, band together to defeat these individuals. But, I was told that there was, kind of like a tribal town of these giants down there in the Florida area, and they were known, to wage war on local tribes, and they were dominant. Not only were they dominant with the people, but they were dominant with the animals and the spirits. And, eventually, again, they kind of all passed away, but again, their descendants are still around, and they may not be practicing the things that they used to do. But, again, to me, there are, evidence that these families still exist. So, again, when we refer to giants, it's just the way you refer to it. Some people think they're like super tall, and they were, they also had spirits that, or entities that were considered giants. And this one that I'm getting ready to talk about, again, for the safety of everyone, he's not going to be named. But, again, he comes from those Appalachian Mountain area, and my understanding, there are caves there that have depictions of this entity, still around. And my understanding, of course, they're not shown to the public, and only very few people know, that these things still exist. But, there are depictions of it. And this thing, they say, again, he was taller than trees. But he was kind of more of a mountain spirit. If you were roaming through those mountains, and you didn't pay homage to him, he would come and devour you and your whole crew. So if they were going to take a war party through there, they would always leave offerings, good ways, to appease him, because if not, nobody would, they wouldn't find none of you guys, So again, they had stories like that, about these entities. And again, another thing I think is cool about these old ancient stories about this individual is when you knew he was coming, he would make that wind whistle. And, if you're ever out in the wilderness or out in the open and you hear that wind, it begins to whistle, and back in those areas, amongst those 5 tribes, they would say that thing is near. And, they would do what is accordingly, to leave an offering so he doesn't take people. He was known to take children. He was known to take women. But he was also known to take warriors, too, whole war parties. And again, those kind of stories you don't hardly hear about anymore. Another thing, kind of kicking it back, even older, this entity or this story, is more claimed by the Plains tribes, but about every nationality or every Indian tribe, they kind of had a similar belief or a similar story of this individual. And his name was Redhorn. And there's a lot of writings and materials on this entity or on this guy, Redhorn. He was kind of like the original Indian. He was the one that he fought those giants. And he battled them out, and Creator gave him some special powers to defeat these guys, because these giants, the original story is they were being very, abusive. They were coming down, just wiping people out, and just doing awful things. So Creator blessed this individual to defeat them. And before he took the head of the chief of the giants, he killed them all off except for 2. And it was that chief and his daughter. And he was getting ready to cut his head off. And the story goes that, that chief made a bargain. He said, I'll give you my head, but you're going to have to marry my daughter. And so he said, well, that's compromisable. He said, that's good trade. So they traded. He took his head, and he took his daughter as a wife. And again, there's a lot of caves with the depiction of Redhorn, all the way up in the Canadas, all the way into Mexico. There are depictions of Redhorn everywhere. So again, whether you believe or don't believe or whatever, there are signs out there from everyone that giants did exist. Even into today, even the good book, the Bible I'm talking about, talks about giants. And there's a lot of argument over that book of Genesis, of Adam being first man. A lot of them considered him a giant at that time, and from there, those Jewish people, they have a name for them, and I think they call them something like Nepolis or something like that. Nephilim, or yeah, you got it. And that's what they called them, and again, it was depicted in the Bible, and of course you heard the famous story of what is it, that little boy defeating Goliath. David and Goliath. It's all up and down in that good book, about giants. whether I'm getting this correct or what, but it's there. So, it's up to you to, do your own research and make your own opinion about this topic. But, again, you go across the waters, the Irish people, they have names for giants. You have Arab countries, that have beliefs in giants. You got Africans, that have stories of these giants with, how you say, mythological superpowers, and, sometimes, some of these things are called upon for good and bad. So again, you're looking at a whole different philosophy when you're thinking about giants. And again, in Indian country, there are millions and millions of stories of tribes that were giants or people that were giants. The Ponca Nation, they have a few songs that are ceremonial that talk about a giant that comes to their village and was really picking on them. He wasn't killing them or eating them. He would just come and beat them up and throw them around, and they finally got tired of him, and they waged war on this giant, and they killed him. And that's what that song talks about, in there. And so, you've got, stories and songs like that. You've got even in, Virginia area, West Virginia area, amongst those tribes, that, excuse me, they have stories of giants in their area, and these giants were more cannibalistic. They went to go and eat people, and again, these giants had supposedly supernatural abilities. They could vanish, they could, of course, run fast, and they could just appear and disappear, at a moment's notice. And so it took supernatural abilities to battle those things. So, those tribes in those areas, they had to do those kind of things. You go to state of Washington, they had stories of giants, that were just straight evil, and amongst those tribes, especially the ones that lived on the coast, they all had some sort of old ancient ceremony that talked or dealt with these giants, in one form or of another. So again, when you're talking about giants, there's a whole different type of philosophy you've got to look at, and again, some of these giants were gifted, with certain medicines and supernatural abilities to be able to see into the future as well. This goes back to the Muskogee people. Again, this story that I'm getting ready to tell is an old, ancient story, and it's a Muskogee story. And, like I was telling you, that, some of these had the ability to see future, have that ability to tell you things. Well, they predicted the coming of today's, I don't know what you call it, today's lifestyle. And I was told that this group of giants, they were so heartbroken for their people that they all had a great council, and they talked amongst themselves, and they told them, said, we're gonna all be enslaved, we're all gonna lose everything, and the Creator will test us, and do we want to put our people through that? Do we want to put our children and grandchildren and all our lineage in that kind of suffering? And those giants, agreed that wasn't for them. And how the story goes, they met up at this great body of water. They had a big feast, and they all made everything right. And they sung this old song. It was a departing song. And while they were singing, one by one, they jumped into that water. And, they drowned themselves till the last one. And he was told to stay to tell that story. And that's how that story goes. Moto.
Man. Yeah, there's and Chris said this earlier, but my gauge on giants is over the course of history, you have different I guess you say tribes, nations, clans, things of that nature over over in Europe and Russia, China, all Japan. The first time I ever heard about giants, and when it pertained to like an indigenous people, would be the red-haired giants out of Korea. They have lore of these giants coming out of caves in North Korea area, and they come out and they brutalize the people there. And if you look at it, if you hear different stories from different tribes, people, in Afghanistan, you got the giant of Kandahar. Mm-hmm. That's a well-known story. Those tribes and those people over there, they talk about Kandahar, and it's this area which is all mountains, and they say that there's mystical things that happen out there. One of them being red-headed giants. Now it looks like a someone from Afghanistan, but it's got red hair, which is kind of crazy. You think about that, but especially in that area. But what they have those supernatural powers that Chris alludes to. They just look a little different. And what those people over there say, that they do, like tell the future. They can move things. They, basically they can change the way the mountain is over there. And this is kind of a crazy story, but it's a story that's, that has trickled out, amongst those people, and then also too amongst our people being over there. And it's called the Giant of Kandahar, right? Is that how it's pronounced? I think. But have you guys heard of that? Giant? Okay.
Is that the army one?
Just the army one. So early 2000s, we go in. Obviously, you guys, 9/11 happens, and we go over there. And the tribes and the people over there are telling our soldiers, "Hey, do not go in this area. It's sacred. Mm-hmm. There's things there that you won't be able to describe." Well, our troops, us being, the way we are sometimes with our military, we went in there anyways. And what they found was a clan of giants, 15 foot tall, 12 foot tall. They were not normal. And they're redheaded, and they come out of this cave. Well, our soldiers get into this firefight. I mean, pretty crazy firefight. And they ended up, I think, like I said, I don't know exactly how, there's different stories, but essentially we eradicated them. And, with all of the weapons that we had there. And the tribes people weren't happy, because sometimes those giants would bring good things to them if they gave them the offerings. Now, I heard something from, I heard something, another way from the story from, I had to translate too. It was like in subtitles. So I don't know if this is exactly what that person was saying, but essentially they were upset with us about that, because they would bring those good things down to them, And so once we did that, things have never been the same over there. They haven't been like, the way that things have been always been for those people. And so there's stories of these giants all over the place. Here in America, I know, Chris mentioned the swamps. They're still seeing those things out there. They're still seeing giants out there. Now, giants as in maybe 11 foot tall, maybe 10, maybe 9. Not like it was, 25 foot tall, crazy, but
Godzilla.
Russellzilla.
Rosilla.
But they're seeing those things, and One thing too that like I was doing some research on this before we obviously convened for this. There's a common thread, of these red-haired giants that we have seen from the Northeast to the South to the Plains to the Southwest and all the way up until the Pacific Northwest. And different chiefs of different nations and tribes, they have come out and books have been written. There was a book that was written in 1899 by, and I cannot remember the name of this woman, but she's from, it might have been Plains, one of the Plains tribes, or Southwest. Like I said, my memory on that. It was written in 1899, and basically it details this fight that happened between these very tall, white, pale, red-headed giants, basically. And they went to war for like 3 years. Then they eventually kind of vanquished them. The Creator kind of gave them some extra power to be able to vanquish these beings in the Southwest. And so there's all types of crazy stories. And I don't want to say crazy, but like they're just stories that that have kind of been lost. You look at, I know Chris mentioned Minnesota off air, but they're finding bones basically every year up there in Minnesota area, Ohio, all those mounds that were out there, But that's one thing that's just crazy about this topic. I mean, it hits every nation, tribe, ethnicity, nationality. And there's a few more, but like I said, man, to bring it back, it's crazy to hear those stories, that they're around.
Another story I was wanting to kind of just touch bases, mention, again, I don't mean no disrespect or anything. I was told that the Quapaws had a story of a female giant. And, of course, amongst the Osages, Quapaws, Caws, those kind of Ponkas, they all have similar stories. They have a set of stories that they call Hiko. Those are their winter stories. And these are more, I don't know what you call, in-depth kind of stories, that they only tell a certain time of the year. They're different than your average spooky story, but they have a set of those female giants amongst the Quapaws. And the way they describe this giant, she's super tall, probably about 10 feet. She's got long hair. But I guess how you say her female organs are super long. And she holds them over her shoulders to capture or nurse children, because that's what she likes to devour. But she had sisters, might have this wrong, but they had their purposes too. But again, they have a whole set of those kind of stories, and that was told to me or sent to me actually by one of their Quapaw researchers, Billy Proctor. And again, he has a whole set of those kind of stories, and I told him, I said, I'll leave that to you guys. So, but I did tell him I would kind of just briefly talk about that. Again, I got another set of stories from the Kiowa people that they waged war on these kind of giants. And these giants, of course, Kiowa people were also known to be big people too, and my understanding, this battle happened up north, and they were able to vanquish those giants at that time. And so the story goes, they had a big battle, because these things kept coming in and, just kind of wreaking havoc on the whole place. So anyway, they went to war with them and they defeated them, but they had to get, help from the Creator to do this. So Creator sent him some special help. So anyway, I think those kind of stories are pretty cool. But if you want to learn more about those kind of stories, definitely go visit them, and ask from them.
I know the Choctaw, before they came over here, back Mississippi, old Mississippi Choctaw days, they used to have a story about giants that were brought in a big canoe, like a ark almost, but they came up to the shores of the Mississippi, and so they have a story about the first time they ever saw them. I don't know it offhand, but I just know that story's out there about these giants coming up in these boats. I guess basically they came up to greet them, and so that's pretty crazy too.
Dang. Yeah. I mean, the one I know is from Life Among Paiutes, I believe is what it's called, or Among the Paiutes. And that's what my buddy James was talking about, because we had a podcast like years ago, and we're just talking about the things that are in Nevada. He was talking about a serpent being in their lake, and he was talking about, we just started talking about these giants, because I asked him, there's this picture floating around the internet. It's these two guys, and I guess they explored this cave where they were at, and they had this huge like skeleton, like just in this coffin, and it's kind of just has its arms crossed, and it's like 10 foot, 11 foot tall, 12 foot maybe, and they're just standing by it, and it was floating around, and it said, this is a cannibalistic giant, a red-haired giant that the Paiutes fought. And so, internet, you can't really believe what everybody says is true. And so I screenshot that picture and I sent it to him. And I said, James, is this real? Is this like a real story, or are they just trying to get some likes and views and stuff? And he said, oh yeah. He's like, yeah, that is real. And so we talked about it, and he read that book. It's called Among the Paiutes, and it's by Sarah Winnemucca, I believe is how you say it. And she wrote that book, but she talked about how these giants, they would come to their where they lived and everything, and they would steal people and they would eat them, and then they would just these evil beings, and they would take them up to wherever they were, and finally, Paiutes got tired of it, just like we were saying, and they started, going to war with them. And so, man, they would battle for years to go on. Finally, they got enough whatever to chase them up this mountain, and they got them in this mountain, and they trapped them inside, and they lit they lit all entries on fire, and they just killed them all in that cave, in a big fire. And so that's where that picture came from. Those guys were exploring that cave, and they found these bodies, and they started bringing them out, and that's why they started taking pictures with them and stuff. And so I thought that was really interesting, and just part of history, that history, because he brought up Rome Chief. I never thought of Rome Chief as like a giant, right? But it's always cool to hear that he was, that's 7.5 feet tall. That's huge, and I mean, growing up around it, it's it's just Rome Chief, and there's a building named after him, and he was one of our chiefs, he was respectable and everything. But I never really thought about his height, but he was a big man is what everybody would say. But just thinking about it now, it's wow, that would have been cool if I could be 8 foot tall. Just sitting here with you guys.
Dang.
That big old hand on that cup.
Eating them Big Macs like M&M's.
Snacks.
That little McDonald's bag in my hand.
I know Yehola keeps talking about red-haired giants, and I want to tell him keep his history to himself. No, I'm just kidding.
Linebacker now.
I mentioned Redhorn, and his battle with the giants, and he made that deal where he had to marry that giant's daughter. And I know Yehola was thinking about that. No, I'm just kidding. No,
I said, dang, I said, man.
But how they described that daughter, she had red hair. A lot of people, to this day argue that was from the Vikings. You know, and they said that was how they depicted that story when the Vikings came here. You know, they were always fighting with the natives here, you know, until the natives sent them on their way, you know.
Yep.
So, you know, again, you know, I don't know, you know. So if you're talking about red-haired giants, yeah, there's even stories about that. But, you know, majority of the stories I was talking more about are native giants, you know, like he mentioned, Rome Chief, you know, and some of these other ones that, you know, are still around today. So again, you know, they did have supernatural abilities, you know, and a lot of them weren't always evil. You know, some of them were good. They helped tribes. You know, just like I was saying, you know, some of them were a group of seers. They would help these tribes, you know, look for the future, you know, and help them in agricultural ways and supernatural ways, you know. So they weren't always depicted as evil and cannibalistic, you know, although there are a lot of stories like that, and I'm sure, you know, some of it was true. So again, you know, I just wanted to kind of share that light on those giants, you know, that they were actually people at one time. So
Yeah, those were always the stories that I had heard, just on the Muskogee side, was that they were like you said, either like a tribal town or like a clan of people, that I don't know. I guess the Muskogee here didn't really interact with them too much. That they had just sort of kind of come to an agreement, like this is our side and that's your side, and you just kind of stay on your side. But I guess the whole like what am I trying to say? Like the meeting place, I guess, or whatever, was like the drinking water. Like they would have to kind of compromise around the water, and that they could only go certain times of the day, or they'd only go certain times, you know, of the week or whatever, to get and retrieve drinking water, because they didn't want to come across these people because of the way they were described to me as like old ones, like, you know, still dressed traditionally, but they were kind of feral, like their mind wasn't all there, like they were kind of simple, I guess, and that they didn't understand their own strength, or they didn't understand, you know, just how, like, normal social skills. They didn't have the same social skills, that they were rough, or they would, you know, would kill, not savage, but I'm trying to say every word but that, but you know what I mean? They were kind of easily provoked. And so those are some of the stories that I was told about those people. But then there's some that you hear that they're opposite of that. It was the same thing, only they were gentle, like gentle giants, you know, and that they were helpful, and they would feast once a year. They would come together and, you know, dance and, you know, feast, and then they would go back their separate ways, and, you know, things like that. But I think I told you before we started, you know, the feral ones, or the savage ones, I guess, were cannibalistic, and that they would devour, you know, women and children. And was always told that they would take the bones and put them in the tops of the trees instead of burying them. And there was a certain tree that they did that with. And if anybody knows this story, let me know. But that the tree back in the day was one of the most beautiful trees, you know, that grew in on the lands. And once the giants began putting the bones of, I want to say, their victims in there, that it became twisted, and that to this day there's no straight branches on that tree, just because of that history behind that they would only put the bones in those certain trees. And I can't remember the tree, but anyway, that's just a story I was told.
yeah, you're correct on that. You know, especially back in our old country. You know, I'm talking about Alabama, Georgia, Florida. You know, the Carolinas. You know, off in that area. You know, where our original people came from. You know, they would say that these beings were so sacred when they passed away that they would they would bury them in certain trees, and these trees were a reminder for us to do certain things, you know, because a lot of times they looked at these guys as either a forest spirit or a mountain spirit, or, you know, Everglades spirit, to keep things right. That's actually the mentality of those old ones towards a lot of these giants. They were the protectors, of certain areas, and they had names for them. And they say, if you ever see a tree that has more of a, how you say, human form to it. There's trees out there. If you out and about and you look, some of them look like they might have a face. Mm-hmm. Some of them might look like, they're standing there in a certain stance or something. You can't help but think, if you know that old history, mm-hmm. maybe one of them was buried in there. Mm-hmm. So
well, it's like the story, because when those giants would die, they would put because that's what they did. They put their bones in trees. Mm-hmm. And I guess the Muskogee people saw that, and I guess we're maybe trying to honor that way, or keep it real tradition like that for them, and they would put their bodies in those trees instead of burying them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's just the stories I was always told.
I know the first time I heard that, I thought that was kind of a crazy way of burying people, but again, that was kind of common amongst those northern tribes during wintertime. Because the ground was so frozen, they couldn't bust that ground open. So sometimes they would put them in trees, So, but where did they get that kind of knowledge where to bury people in a tree?
Right.
And so to me, those original Creek stories about those giants make sense to me when I learned that they do that up north.
Yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead. I was just going to piggyback off what you were saying about. So it's Lovelock Cave in New Mexico, and so when those two guys that Russell mentioned, they brought out that skeleton. They brought in, and I can't remember the university that those guys contacted after they brought that skeleton out. Well, they came in and they basically collapsed the cave. So here in the last probably 50 years, they've kind of excavated more, and they found at first, when they did it, they only found 10,000 articles, and they couldn't find any giant bones. And what they were finding of some of those bones, of the normal sized people bones, is they were carved out. The bone marrow was carved out, and it was just like a little bone, femur bone, and they were finding it was all carved out. And I guess that's a sign of cannibalism, is when they find bones like that. And so years later, they had dug up that cave from the first expedition, because they had jacked that whole thing up, and they went further in, and they found what those guys found originally was these giant bones. And it was just carcasses, they were all kind of leaned up. They were thinking maybe smoke inhalation maybe is what got them, because they burned the caves down. And as they got further into the caves, they started looking up at the ceiling, and it all had burn marks on the tops of the caves. And so the university, I don't know which one that came in and did the confirmation of this story that was told in among Paiutes, but they confirmed that story. Well, then they started to do kind of more DNA testing on these bones, and they found out that these giants had red hair.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's maybe an indicative thing, but they were. I don't know if that's a thing that. When you grow that, I don't know if you grow that big, your just hair turns red. I don't know, but yeah, they did some DNA testing, and they found out they had red hair, and that's a crazy story. Something similar to that is over in Papua New Guinea. I believe it's Papua New Guinea, off those islands, kind of. And it's called Solomon's Island. So back in what was it, the 1400s, Spain sent out an explorer. And he didn't know what to name these islands. And so he just called them, it's, at the time, I think it was King Solomon was the king. And we'll just call him the Solomon King, the islands. Well, as time went on, they were talking to the natives over there, the indigenous people, and they were saying, hey, you guys need to be careful around this time of night, because these giants come out. And the guy's like, what? Whatever, all right, well, he didn't see nothing. So then they're gone. Years later, and this guy's name is Morris Coram, I think is how you say his name. And this is in the 1900s. And he was, non-native, to that place, and he's living there, and he marries one of the indigenous women there. And so she's telling him, like, hey, there's these giants that still live here, and they come out at night. And I guess they had a kind of a high missing person rate at that time. Like, people were just going missing, thinking people, oh, they're getting off the island. You know, they want to get back to the mainland. Like, that's kind of what they were thinking. And, you know, he ends up dedicating his life to trying to find these giants on this island. And he goes through and he finds caverns that basically, this island sits on top, and there's caverns that go along every stretch of this island. This one island in, it's like I said, I think it's Papua New Guinea is what I read. And he ends up basically, and now, like I said, now I don't know if who knows, truly. But this, like I said, 1900s, 1899, whatever, 1800s, whatever. And they said that he literally killed one in the caves because him and his team were going down there and trying to explore and find it, and they ended up killing one. And to this day, they still say, those natives over there, those indigenous people say that these giants are still over there. And how they're described is they look just like the native indigenous people there. They're just big. It's like 11, 12 foot tall. And I want to say that's called the Solomon Keys Island. I know it's Solomon Island for sure, but there might be another name for it. But I just find that pretty interesting, you know, that they think they still have them out there.
Sure, they do.
All right.
I mean, today there's still videos on TikTok. I mean, of like these giants on these mountaintops. And that one that you told about, that army one, was it? I don't know if I'm thinking of a different one, but it was like another. It was maybe it's the same thing, but it was a group of soldiers that went into this one cave and they found a giant, and he just started like killing them.
Yeah,
is that the same one?
Same one.
Okay, but it was a whole tribe of giants.
Yeah, that's what they said that they found one, but then they, like I said, I think that's the same story. I just kind of told it briefly, but like a summary of it, because I don't want to be too wordy sometimes. But I feel like I talk too much.
You made it up. No.
But
No, I'm just kidding.
but yeah, that's essentially what happened. They found one, and then they found the clan after that.
Oh, dang.
And so the one they said the one basically was just like mowing people down.
Yeah.
Like, it was just mowing people down, and they ended up, you know, I don't know, I can't remember the ending of it for sure, but I know that they did eradicate them. Oh.
Yeah, they got him. Sad.
I know it's bringing that. That's one thing too. Like, to me, they brought, you know, we can go on about, you know, the removal and all that stuff, and that just kind of makes me think, like, you know, we did it to, you know, we did that again, you know, to people we don't even know, you know, people ain't even, you know, that are just there. And, you know, I think of that because, like I said, you know, that being, or those giants or whatever, you know, I don't know what they're called over there, but, you know, they were moving, like, what they were doing is, like, the soldiers would be up in these mountains, and they'd change the path for them to go off to the other side, and they do things to keep them kind of protected. So, you know, it's just kind of crazy, you know, how that kind of shook out with that. Now, they say it's alleged, but there's people over there that say that that happened. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was another story I wanted to kind of go over, you know, and this comes from Anchorage, Alaska. You know, right outskirts of Anchorage, there's a set of mountains, or a mountain that looks like a person laying down, you know, and it's facing, you know, the sky, they say. And I think they call it Spirit Mountain. I was trying to find it, but I can't find it. But I know I got some pictures of it in my personal collection, you know, and the story goes is that, you know, long time ago, kind of like the Creek story, you know, these giants knew the world was going to come to a bad way, and that their time was no longer here, you know. This was kind of a good story, you know, amongst those Alaskan natives that, you know, had these kind of stories, you know, and you know, it gifted those Alaskan natives some healing powers, because I guess back in when those giants were around, that they used to do the ceremonies for them. And my understanding, when they were told that things were going to change, they said, well, we're going to lay down and put ourselves to rest. And the last one that was there was the one that did form that Spirit Mountain outside of Anchorage. And when you look at that mountain, again, it has human characteristics. Mm-hmm. And, you go up there and take pictures, you can see it. It looks like a big person laying down. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so cool, hearing a story like that. And then you flip over to, the Arizona area amongst those tribes, kind of a similar story, amongst the natives there. And, again, these giants were helpful beings. And so, again, the story goes, they laid down to, be no more, so, but they created, how you say, their own image in the rock.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And so those are the stories that they have of these mountains, to show that, their belief in these giants weren't always bad. They believed that they were good. So, there's certain mountains out there that, not only amongst native tribes here, but across the waters, they have certain areas that, you'll hear a story of, the giants became no more. So they laid down and became one with nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing that's going around is like all these giant mountains and stuff. Like they're actually giants that did do that. They laid down and just gone because there's that where's that one? Looks like a giant tree stump. And it's they think it's a rock, but it looks like a giant tree stump. And I think they're like trying to call it like the tree of life. But somebody drew a picture, like an artwork of it, and then basically like people are saying that's a giant tree that was cut down by I forgot who, but it's somebody that wasn't good. And so that's why that's there. But somebody drew like giants on top of it fighting these beings crawling up it. So it's pretty cool. Like that was like their last like fight they had before a lot of stuff started happening in the world. And so damn, I forgot that rock. But I mean, even like there's like giant like rock formations of snakes.
Yeah.
And there's one of like a crocodile too, like this giant crocodile, and it's like a rock formation. And it's like, whoa, it's like that's pretty scary. Like,
dang, imagine we're just living our daily life, and all of a sudden this monster snake or Godzilla.
Yeah. Well, movie Troll. Have you guys watched that?
Yeah.
On
awesome.
Netflix.
Yeah.
I need to check it out.
That's a good one.
Yeah, like that. It's just a rock, right? Yeah. And then where's that in Scotland?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an awesome movie. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it.
Mm-hmm. That made me think of that, like when you're talking about that, like how it just awakened.
Man,
they thought it was a rock and it just came up from the ground and it just started wreaking havoc.
Dang, Godzilla.
But then you find out like it's pretty much sad, right? Because his people are gone.
Oh man, yeah. Well, that's like Godzilla. They nuke the water and the nuclear waste gets down into him and he's like gets activated. Mm-hmm. So you just never know. That's like you truly, we don't. I feel like I'm here. I'll go ahead and put that tinfoil hat on for y'all. Anyways. But, there's a lot of things that are going on that we don't know anything about. And I know, Russell, you were about to touch on it. But what was his name? The guy that had captured that thing on the hilltop, the mountain?
Oh, I forgot. I know what you're talking about, though. It's a TikTok video.
Yeah, and, I feel like the veil is being lifted on things that we're seeing. Like, I feel like there's been more ghost stories, more Bigfoot stories, more Dogman stories, like more like supernatural, things happening, and for that guy to see that, and then not, what was it, 2 months later he's passed away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of those type of things.
Yeah. What did it say, Tyler? A week, like months?
Yeah.
A few months?
A few months later.
Yeah. So if you guys just type in giants or something on TikTok, and that should be the first video that pops up. But anything else you guys want to bring up?
I like this. I like this. This was a good
Giants.
topic.
Yeah.
Good topic.
New York Giants.
God.
Andre.
Let's talk about 1989. The Giants from New York.
Dang, the Little Giants.
The Little Giants.
It's a good movie, man. That holds up.
It's on Tubi right now. So
I know. I saw that.
But yeah, so I guess let everybody know where to follow your personals at.
Yehola Tiger.
Plug yourself.
Oh, Yehola Tiger on Facebook. Warcry Podcast is my podcast. TikTok, One Man Band 918. I think that's it.
Christopher Honka Hill on TikTok and Instagram. Motto.
Tyler Randall. You can catch me on Skoden Cinema or Skoden_Cinema on Instagram. I'm also at Pump Action Podcast. And yeah, that's me.
Russell Sunnigal on Facebook. Check me out on Instagram at Okie Podcasts, at Russellus49. Check out Turtle Island Boys, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify. Me and Robin Jackson from the Classic Wolf Podcast have started that. I'd say it's a joking around type of podcast. We're just talking about whatever and going off on stuff. Explicit. So check that one out. Okie Podcast as well, available everywhere. Follow us at Reservation_Mysteries on TikTok. Check us out on YouTube, Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation. Subscribe and hit that bell to let you know when we have content coming out. Follow us on Instagram. I believe it's Unsolved Reservation Mysteries, and follow us on Facebook as well. And I think that's it.
Also, too, the deal still stands. We get 5K on YouTube. Chris has got something for y'all.
It's a secret.
It's a secret, though. No.
Yep.
Look at him. No. But all right, everybody. So stay smudged up. Bye.